It's time to tune in to Defending the Faith with Frank Harber. Hear the latest about religious liberty.
A win for religious freedom in one of the remaining blockbuster cases facing the U.S. Supreme Court this term.
A legal battle continues for the Little Sisters of the Poor for nearly a decade now.
A street preacher armed with a speaker, a microphone, and a camera strapped to his chest is now banned from the village.
Our founding fathers believed in the separation of church and state, but not for one fleeting moment did they believe in the separation of God and government.
And powerful apologetics. Are you prepared to defend the faith?
I'm convinced unless we trust in God, this nation is finished.
We're facing a new kind of enemy. We're involved in a new kind of warfare, and we need the help of the Spirit of God.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of Defending the Faith. I am Frank Harber. I am your host. I am the president and the chief legal counsel for Defending the Faith Alliance, and we defend the faith. We're about defending the faith in the legal arena. We've got many court cases across the country. We're helping people with all kinds of legal issues that are made possible because people help us do that. We do almost all of our cases pro bono, so we appreciate you praying for us and keeping up with us. We also defend the faith in the theological arena, and so we do many wonderful things there, and I speak in churches all across the country. Today, we have a very special episode because once upon a time, I used to be a professor at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas. In fact, I got my Southwestern mug today, GJ, that I won in the golf tournament there for closest to the pin. But once upon a time, I was a professor there, and I had this incredible student named GJ Walton, and he's went on and become just a fabulous minister. He's up in the panhandle of Texas. He is at First Baptist Silverton, Texas, in great church. But today, this show is going to be amazing because GJ is not only the senior pastor of First Baptist Silverton, but he is the justice of the peace for the county that Silverton's in. And I think that's Briscoe County. And he'll tell us more. It's Briscoe County. So he is pastor and he is judge. So, we have a lot of pastors that subscribe to this show and watch it. But this is going to be a show that many of our pastors are going to be interested because they're like, what is it like to be the judge of the county where you pastor? Because, GJ could put everybody in jail. So he's the judge, folks. So anyway, before we get into all that, welcome to the show, GJ Walton.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about my unique experience as pastor and judge.
Well, tell us about your family here, and also tell us how you came to know the Lord real quick.
Sure. I grew up in and around the church. I had folks that influenced me early on. My grandparents were a tremendous influence, my parents. So I grew up in a Christian household, and I came to know the Lord at a young age. We lived in Granbury, Texas. I grew up there in Granbury, and we attended Acton Baptist Church. And even though I was about 6 or 7 years old, I still remember being in a service and feeling the Holy Spirit just moved me to respond to an altar call. And I went down, spoke with the pastor who, Glenn Ward was the pastor while I was growing up there at Acton Baptist Church. And Brother Glenn had a time with me in his office with my parents, and we talked about what that meant. And I accepted the Lord and was baptized there at Acton Baptist Church at an early age, and have not always been faithful to what God has called me to. There was a period where I knew I was called to ministry, and I tried to run from that during my college years. And but the Lord got a hold of me once again through those influential people. After I graduated from Baylor University, went to Southwestern Seminary and answered that call that I knew God had placed on my life, and became a youth minister right out of while I was in seminary. I worked as a youth minister a few churches there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then eventually became pastor at North Wayland Baptist Church. And then after serving there for 7 years, was called up here to First Baptist Silverton. We've been here about 10 years now. So I have raised my children here. We have 5 kids. My wife, Jennifer, and I, our oldest is now graduated from Baylor, and he works and lives in Wisconsin. Our oldest daughter is a student at Dallas Baptist University. And then we have 3 children still here in school in Silverton. We have a junior, a freshman, and a second grader. So our kids range from 23 down to 7 years old. So a broad range of kids that keep us busy. So I'm here in Silverton now, and have been the Justice of the Peace now for almost 2 years, alongside being pastor here at First Baptist Silverton.
Wow. Well, man, I'm looking forward to meeting your kids. Going to be in Silverton in the near future. And I think my oldest son, Graham, is coming with me, but I got my 2 sons producing the show today, Graham and Hunter, and they're right here in the studio with us. But okay, so you're the Justice of the Peace. So tell us, for our listeners that don't know, what is a Justice of the Peace?
Well, the Justice of the Peace, they serve all throughout Texas. Every county has at least one. Usually there's 2 to 4. Our county has 2. And we serve as basically the people's judge of the people's court. The Justice of the Peace has varying duties depending on the size of the county and the responsibilities that can be passed around. But in a rural county like this, the Justice of the Peace serves for small claims court up to $20,000 in dispute. The Justice of the Peace is also a magistrate. And so I set bail and sign warrants and do all the things that a magistrate does. The Justice of the Peace in a rural county is also the medical examiner. And so I conduct inquest. And then mostly, misdemeanors that are non-jailable offenses will come through my court. So mostly I handle traffic tickets and game warden citations. So I say most of the time I'm a glorified clerk because I'm just handling those transactions. But there are times when I can be called at 3 a.m. to go to the scene of an accident to make a death declaration. There are times whenever I can be called out to go and magistrate somebody at the jail. So a lot of varying duties and a lot of things that we do as justices of the peace throughout the state of Texas.
Wow. So is that hard? Because somebody dies and I guess you go there and you have to make a determination if there was foul play, if it's an accident. I mean, tell us we want to know. Tell us what happens on this.
Yeah. So I became Justice of the Peace as an appointed official. I wasn't elected to begin with. Our elected official couldn't finish out his term. And so the county appointed me to finish out his term. As pastor, I couldn't have run against somebody. I don't think that would be just a good thing for the community. And so being appointed, I saw a unique opportunity to step into a position and serve the community in a unique way. And so one of the things that I found out not long after I was sworn in is that I was also the medical examiner for the county. And I knew that the Justice of the Peace was called to death scenes. As pastor, I've been called, to meet with a family when someone passes away. And so I would see the Justice of the Peace and interact with the Justice of the Peace. I didn't realize how far that duty went. I didn't know that the Justice of the Peace is actually given the task to determine things like, is there foul play involved? And ultimately sign the death certificate and list the cause of death. So it's a really interesting thing that folks who may have no medical training at all are put in the position to make those sorts of determinations. Now we have resources. We rely on true medical examiners and pathologists to help us figure things out. We rely on our law enforcement officers. So when I've been called to a scene, I may walk over to the sheriff or the highway patrolman or the game warden or whoever the law enforcement officer is in charge at the scene, and ask them a question. And usually their first answer is, "Well, you're the one in charge here, Judge." And so I put on my humble hat really quick and let them know I understand that, but I need your help. So there's lots of folks who help us along through that process. But it is an interesting aspect of the job. One of the things that I found in being the pastor and the justice of the peace here in a community like this is, if someone does pass away, someone we know here in the community, usually one of the pastors would be called. But occasionally that may not be the case. Maybe the family doesn't have an association with the church. I've been able to be there as justice of the peace, but I've also been able to be there as a pastor when a pastor needs to be called. And I appreciate our local law enforcement. They understand my position. And I was called to a death scene, an accident at our lake. And whenever I pulled up on the scene, there was an adult son of the decedent that was just obviously in distress and, one of the worst moments of his life. And the sheriff was able to introduce me. This is GJ Walton, not the justice of the peace, but he's the pastor at the Baptist church, and he'll pray with you and help you through this, but he's also the justice of the peace. So it just has provided for some unique opportunities.
And I mean, you have two hats on all the time, because you're never not the pastor and, and then you're also the justice of the peace. That's incredible. So, as you know, I'm an attorney, and so I've won over 100 trials in justice of the peace courts. Mm-hmm. So here in Texas, justice of the peace courts are governed by what we call the 500 series. And so, GJ's been trained to know this series. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm in justice of the peace courts more than I am in county and district and federal courts. Even though I'm in all those courts, my preferred court, my people, is justice of the peace courts, because I will tell you this, that justice of the peace courts are the people's courts, and justice of the peace courts originated in England. And so, I'll tell you something crazy about myself, GJ. So, my 28th great grandfather was John Lackland. He was King of England. Now, he is not really famous, but he's infamous, because he was the reason that we have the Magna Carta, and they put all the rights in, and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights is built on that, because so, because my great grandfather wasn't a very good king. And so all these things had to be put in place. But justice of the peace, they were brought over here to the colonies, and, these are the things that were put in. And especially here in Texas, the Republic, that was court. And, it has such an integral history into the state of Texas. And I'll tell you this, to this day, these courts are super important. And even in urban areas, like here in, I'm in South Lake, Texas, so we're in Tarrant County. Tarrant County has 8 of these, and Dallas has tons of them. So the more you get, and I believe, GJ, that any city with over 8,000 people, there's law on this, that you have to have another justice of the peace. And so, and justice of the peace judges, they're servants to the community, and they're elected, and they're the closest contact that we have with the people. And so, do you find that challenging, that that you're the judge and you're the pastor? Okay, so here's what everybody wants to know. So, have you ever been in court and a church member came in, and
Sure.
you're sitting as judge, and there's a church member there.
Sure. Yeah, because obviously, small community, I know who's going to be coming into court before court is in session. And so I've been able to reach out to folks and just ask them, should we send this case down to the other justice of the peace, or do you want me to hear the case? In one situation, there were folks that were in a dispute, and one happened to be a church member. The other was not a church member, but I made it very clear that I was going to be the impartial judge. I'm the neutral party here. And so I'm going to make a decision that I feel is in the best interest of justice and both of you whenever it comes down to it. And so I asked them, should I send this to our other justice of the peace to be heard in his court? Are you comfortable, with me hearing the case? And thankfully they were both good with me hearing the case. Now I told them at the end of the day, one of you may be mad at me. And so beforehand, this is not going to be my fault. I've given you the opportunity. And so I do find that interesting. One of the things that I spoke to the deacons about before I took this position was, I wanted to make sure that we are never in a position to hurt the reputation of the church. And so we are in a unique place. Our community is really small. Our county is really small. We're one of the least populous counties in the state of Texas. I believe at the last census, we might be listed as the 10th least populous county. And so we all know one another, or we at least know of one another. And so, the reputation of the church could hinge on, so many things, not just the pastor, and not just the pastor being justice of the peace, but any church member, is bearing the, and it's not a burden, it's the privilege to represent Christ in our community. And so I want to do that as the justice of the peace also. And so it is a unique thing. So I have had that opportunity to sit as judge with a church member in the, in the courtroom. And, I believe whenever we, came to the end of the hearing and it was time to make a decision, that they respected that, respected, my decision as a judge, but also they understood that this was, ultimately, not necessarily a reflection of the pastor of First Baptist Silverton or, the justice of the peace, but this was GJ and we're going to trust his judgment on this. And so on some level, I'm humbled that, folks would, allow me to even do that, sit in judgment, over their disputes. And so, I don't say that to pat myself on the back and say, well, it's my reputation, but it is one of those things that's important in a place like this. Our reputation matters. And people know that I'm not just the justice of the peace. They know I'm the pastor at the Baptist church. And so those things matter whenever I'm going to go over there and sit in the courtroom and make those sorts of decisions. So I don't take that lightly at all. I see that as an important responsibility. I am representing Christ right there in the courtroom. And so I want that to be something that all parties walk away from, being able to say that they were treated fairly, treated with respect, that the decision was just and good, even if they disagreed with it. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to balance here.
Well, I've been in justice of the peace courts all over Texas. I mean, there may be some attorneys that have been in more justice of the peace courts than me, but I don't know. Because, man, I even going out towards you, okay, so like, I'm going to make the drive to your church next week. But, I mean, from Decatur, yes. And then, Bowie, Montague, Wichita Falls, and then, heading on towards you, Childress and Vernon. I mean, I've been to all of these places. And one thing that I love is courthouses. And so, every courthouse tells a great story. In fact, I'm going to insist that you take me to Briscoe courthouse, because I'm going to want to see it, and because I love all the history and everything else. And so I had a best friend, and he's with the Lord now. He was a preacher. And so he would always call me and say, Frank, how'd court go today? And I'd say, oh, let me tell you about the courthouse. He goes, no, not another courthouse story. Yes, I'd tell him a courthouse story. So he was my best friend. And he lost his wife in February. He just was, beside himself. And, he was 83, and he just almost didn't feel like he could go on without his wife. They had been sweethearts forever and ever, 3 kids and wonderful kids. And on Easter Sunday, he went up and preached, and he talked about it in his clothes, walked off the pulpit, and he died. And his name was Buddy Duggins, and he was pastor at Forest Home Baptist Church in Kilgore, Texas, on TV, a legend. When I went to his funeral, they lined the roads for 5 miles out to the cemetery, just signs and people waving, because it was back during COVID and they couldn't go in the cemetery. It was unbelievable. And so every time now I win a trial, I wear one of Buddy's ties, and I have one on right now today. GJ, this was Reverend Duggan's tie. And so whenever I win a trial, which I won one yesterday, I post the picture, and I have a picture of a new tie. So I put a different tie on every time I win a trial. I put one of Buddy's ties on. And I also put the link to the close of his message. It's just 2 minutes long. We should put that in the show notes because everybody should watch it. But right now, at the time of the airing of this show with you, GJ, it's at 5.5 million views. But somebody asked me the other day, they said, Frank, do you win every time. Do you ever lose? And I was like, yes, I do. But I never post those. I never take a picture of them.
Sure.
But I've lost 4 times, GJ, in justice court. It was hard, and we probably appealed all of them and stuff like that. But, it gave me an appreciation of this, that, most of the time that I go into court with my cases, I know I'm going to win. And so from there, what I want to have is a good attitude, and I want to be respectful of court, respectful of the judge, and not be like, oh, of course I've won, but I always appreciate justice court judges who they take the time, even though they know the person's going to lose, to hear the side of the story and to listen to them, because a lot of people, they probably know they're going to lose too, but they just want to be heard. So, what are your thoughts as the judge? What are you trying to accomplish when you come in?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Oftentimes you're right. People want to be heard. We had a unique case. Part of the responsibility in my court is to hear the Class C misdemeanor cases that come up, and that can include drug paraphernalia cases. We're near a university over in Canyon, Texas, and there was a student there who had a case, and he really felt like he wasn't being heard. And so I talked to him, and we all met, and the county attorney and I agreed that the officer who was a part of the case, we agreed that we didn't want this to be something that did any damage to that young man's reputation or his scholarship that he held with the university. But it was really important for him to make sure that his voice was heard. And so we went through the process of hearing the case, and he knew, because of some of the things that he had said when he interacted with the officer, that he was going to be found guilty. But he needed his voice to be heard. And so right before I rendered judgment, I gave him the opportunity to change his plea. And we'd already worked out an agreement with the county attorney, and she knew what she was going to offer him to be able to handle this in such a way that it wasn't going to tarnish his reputation or his record. And he took that, but he took it after his voice was heard. And he wanted to make sure we all understood where he was coming from in this situation. And I really feel like justice was served that day. But more importantly, in the case of this particular young man, his voice was heard by all of us. And we all walked away with just a tremendous amount of respect for him. And I expect one day to be sitting on the bench, and he comes in as an attorney representing somebody because he told us that day that was his goal. And so just a unique opportunity, but it goes to what you said about people wanting to make sure that their side of the story is told. And so we can offer that in justice court for sure, because it is definitely the court for the people, and they will have their voice heard. They will have their story told, and at the end of the day, justice will be served. But it is a unique opportunity. And if folks have never, been involved in any sort of legal altercation, courtrooms are open. You can go in and observe justice court. And sometimes you'll walk away being more entertained than you would be if you sat down in front of the TV for an hour, for sure, because it is a unique thing to see as justice court plays out every day across our great state. So.
Well, I tell you, courts they're just fascinating places. Now, here's what people may not know about justice court. A justice court is not a court of record, which means that there's, unlike, county court or district court, there's a stenographer there, and and they will put what they call on the record. And then if you don't want them to record it, you have to say, Your Honor, I want to go off the record. And then you could blah, 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 blah. And then it's like you're in justice court. But in justice court, you're always off the record. Now, if you lose in justice court, you can appeal it for double the judgment. Usually that's the bond. And then you go to a court where everything's going to be on the record. And the new trial will be what's called, in legal terms, de novo, which means as though it was the first time ever. But you have that appeal bond. So if you appeal your case and you go to the next level and you lose, what happens, DJ? What happens to that bond if you lose?
It's no longer, you've lost twice the amount, right? So, yeah. Yeah. So if you had just taken the justice court judgment, it might have been easier on the pocketbook.
Yeah. I mean, so, it's, so like sometimes I do represent people and, in criminal cases, and almost never, but it's always for a friend, usually for preachers, and preachers' kids, they need help. So sure. Anyway, but I had one recently, and he was like, Dr. Harber, I did not do this, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, we're going to get you off, and blah, blah, blah. But then I got the discovery, GJ, and you could see it all on video. And then he went, well, I didn't know there was video. In that case, I'm guilty. and so, that changed it because he didn't realize they had video cameras, So, as we kind of transition here to the end, let's talk about, the Bible talks about that God is the judge. God is the lawgiver. There's one judge and one lawgiver, and that's God. And on this world, we have imperfect judges, but God's going to be the perfect judge. I guess in some ways, a justice of the peace, though, is an extension of justice here on earth. Can you kind of take us to the end on this?
Yeah, just thinking that through, we, oftentimes you'll hear in popular circles or in the culture today, where we're not to judge one another, but we make judgments all the time. And so, if I am in the courtroom serving as justice of the peace, my judgment on a traffic ticket or, an eviction, that judgment, is going to come down for that particular case. But one of the things that, if I have an opportunity to interact with people, I make sure they know that, that's not ultimate judgment by far, especially when you think about justice court. We are the lowest level court, but still a very important court. But, it's not my judgment upon someone that matters in the end. It's going to matter for today, and it's going to matter maybe for, a period of time if somebody, takes a deferred adjudication or something like that in my court. But you're right. One day Jesus will come, and he will judge the quick and the dead. And he is the ultimate judge, and he is the one who is the righteous judge. My judgments are going to be imperfect. There may be times whenever I may not hear all the details, or maybe I miss something, or I'm going to make a mistake in my judgment. And thankfully we have appeals, and those things can go on. But one day all appeals will be played out, and we will all stand before the King. And some will bend their knee, and others, their knee will be forced to bend. And we will bow before the righteous judge. And right now we have the opportunity to share with folks the good news of Jesus Christ, so that whenever they stand before him, they won't be judged upon their own merits. They won't be judged on what they did that was right and wrong. They'll be judged based upon the righteousness of Christ. And so I want to represent him in every way that I can, as pastor, as justice of the peace, as husband, as father, as community member. But I want to make sure people understand the true judge and know who the true judge is. And so that's part of, I would say that's the most important thing that we're doing here today is, we can talk about the fun stuff of serving as justice of the peace and, the important things about being a part of a community. But the most important thing is to know that he is the righteous judge. He is the one who has the right to judge us. And one day we'll stand before him. And I want everyone to know they can stand before him based upon the righteousness of Christ or based upon their own merits. And their own merits will always, always, always fall short. It is only through the righteousness of Christ that we can be found not guilty. And so I want to make sure to tell as many people as I can about that.
Amen. You've been listening today to Pastor GJ Walton. He is the pastor of First Baptist Silverton, Texas. I'm going to have to nominate him for maybe the most unique pastor in the state of Texas, because he is judge and pastor. And I tell you what, he is awesome. And he is a lighthouse to his community. You talk about salt and light. GJ is that guy. And, I'm just so proud of him. And, he was a former student. And so I'm just beaming about this guy. I'm just goo goo gaga about what he's doing. He's doing amazing work. GJ, in these last seconds here, let us know how we can keep up with you, and you preach every week. So how can we find your sermons or anything else about you?
Sure. Our Facebook for the church, First Baptist Silverton. You can find me on Facebook just at GJ Walton, and we will have links there to the church's Facebook page. But we just do a real simple Facebook Live every week. And so on the church's Facebook, all those are archived. You can go back through. But each week during our hour of worship from 10:30 to 11:30, you can find us there on Facebook Live. So that's a real simple way to find us.
Awesome. Well, I hope that this episode has blessed you. We hope that you'll share it with somebody, because it's very, very, very interesting. Also, you can keep up with our episodes online at defendingthefaith.law. And be sure and sign up there. You can get our updates, and we'll alert you when the newest podcast comes out every single week. We come out with a new show every single week. And right now, when you sign up, you get a free book, an ebook called Objection Overruled. And this is how to answer the top 10 objections to Christianity. And it'd be a real blessing to you. Well, God bless you. Thank you for listening. And we will see you in the next episode of Defending the Faith.